The crowning achievement of King Solomon's reign was the erection of the magnificent temple in the capital city of ancient Israel, Jerusalem. His father, King David, had wanted to build the great temple a generation earlier as a permanent resting place for the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the Ten Commandments. A divine mandate, however, had forbidden him from doing so. Solomon built the first temple as an abode for Ark in 957 BCE. However, other sanctuaries retained their religious functions until Hosea abolished them and established the Temple of Jerusalem as the only place of sacrifice in the Kingdom of Judah. Solomon's temple was also a place of assembly for the entire people. Therefore, the building itself was not large, but the courtyard was extensive. The temple building faced eastward. Solomon's temple remained in Jerusalem for almost 400 years. Scholars suggest that nearly half of the Old Testament writings occurred when Solomon's temple was still functioning. Understanding some facts about Solomon's temple can offer more insights on one of the holiest places in the world. Historical background: Jerusalem, situated on a plateau in the Judean mountains between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea, is one of the oldest cities in the world. The three Abrahamic religions consider Jerusalem a holy site. So too, Jerusalem is surrounded by three valleys: the Hinnom, the Tyropoeon, and the Kidron Valley. According to the Book of Samuel, the Jebusites controlled the area of Jerusalem at the time of King David. But David wished to take control of the city. Understandably, the Jebusites contested his attempt, and since Jebus was the strongest fortress in Canaan, they boasted that even the blind and lame could withstand David's siege. According to the version of the story in the Masoretic text, David managed to conquer the city by a surprise attack, led by Joab, through the water supply tunnels. After capturing the town, David made Jerusalem his capital. David then moved the Ark of the Covenant, the supreme symbol of Israelite religion, to Jerusalem. He began preparations for building a temple in Jerusalem. Nevertheless, after receiving the message from God that he would not be the one to build the temple in Jerusalem, David went on to prepare materials that could later be used when Solomon carried out the actual construction. David prepared iron, bronze, cedar trees and other necessary items. As part of his preparation, David purchased the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. David might have thought that the hilltop would make a beautiful place to build the temple of the Lord. According to the Talmud, God gathered the earth that was formed into Adam, the first person from here. Similarly, Jewish tradition says that Adam, and later Cain and Abel and Noah offered sacrifices to God at this place. Jewish sources also identify this place as the mountain of Moriah in Genesis chapter 22 and the rock upon which Jacob dreamt about angels ascending and descending on a ladder. As mentioned, David wanted to construct a permanent temple there, but as his hands were bloodied, he was forbidden to do so himself. The task was left to his son Solomon. After David's death, King Solomon began constructing the temple in Jerusalem. In preparation for the building, Solomon made an alliance with Hiram, the king of Tyre. Hiram provided Solomon with skilled workmen and, apparently, permitted him to cut timber in Lebanon. Solomon began to build the temple in the 4th year of his reign. Its erection occupied 7 years. According to the Bible, in the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, Solomon began to build the temple of the Lord. Solomon finished building the temple after 7 years of construction. The tabernacle and the temple. The Temple of Solomon was patterned after the Tabernacle of Moses, Israel's portable and ornate tent shrine. The tabernacle and its furnishings were made of valuable materials: gold, acacia wood and fine-colored hangings. The tabernacle was divided into 3 main courts: the outer court, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. The holy place contained the table on which the bread of the presence was placed, the altar of incense and the 7-branched candelabrum, known as the menorah. The Holy of Holies, the inner room, hidden behind a curtain, was thought to be God's actual dwelling place, where God invisibly enthroned above a solid slab of gold that rested on the Ark of the Covenant and had a cherub at each end. In the Holy of Holies there was the Ark of the Covenant, and 2 golden angels. This ark was a gold-covered wooden box containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Only the high priest was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies once a year on the Day of Atonement. The outer court was called the Tent of Meeting. The outer court represented the fallen woe, while the inner courts represented a more sacred and holier way of life. God was to be approached with extreme reverence, through the appointed priests, who regularly offered a complex series of animal sacrifices, to gain his forgiveness and favor. Solomon's temple replicated this same 3-level progression of the tabernacle. Design and layout. The first thing a visitor might notice in the Solomon's temple is the brazen, or bronze altar of sacrifice. This altar, located between the entrance to the courtyard and the doorway to the holy place of the sanctuary, was 20 cubits long and wide and 10 cubits high. On the 4 corners of the altar were 4 horns often repressing power. This is where the sacrificial animals were burned. Because of this location, no one could come into God's presence without first encountering this sizable altar. Its central location is significant, for it reminded Israelite worshippers that access to God depended on the efficacy of the various kinds of sacrifices presented on it. These sacrifices were vital for ensuring that sinful, defiled people could approach God's holy presence safely. On the southeast side of the temple was the molten or brazen sea, which rested on the backs of 12 oxen, 3 pointing in each cardinal direction. In ancient times, oxen represented strength, and the number 12 often represented the 12 tribes of Israel. Water from the larger brazen sea was poured into 10 bronze water basins on both sides of the temple, which could then be wheeled around the outer court for various washing and cleaning rituals by the priests. There were 3 floors of chambers or storage rooms around the temple's south, west, and north sides. The storage rooms were accessed by a door on the temple's south side, with wooden ladders going up to each floor. 2 large bronze pillars that flanked the porch located at the front of the temple. The pillar on the left was named Boaz, and the post on the right was called Jashan. The tops were decorated with lily flower petals and pomegranates. Pomegranates were a sign of prosperity and posterity because of their many seeds and were also found on the bottom hem of the high priest's clothing. The main temple doors were 2 large bifolding doors covered in gold with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. Once you enter the main doors, you enter the holy place, a large room, 40 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits tall. The room was overlaid with gold and decorated with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. 10 large, constantly burning menorahs, 5 on each side of the room, and narrow windows on each side of the top of the room were the source of light. The table of showbread, which had 12 large flat pitha-like loaves, was placed on the right side of the room. The priests ate and then replaced the showbread every Sabbath. The altar of incense stood directly in front of the Holy of Holies. The altar was similar to the altar of sacrifice. However, on the altar of sacrifice was burned the flesh of animals, while upon the altar of incense burned a sweet combination of incenses. Only the high priest was able to enter the Holy of Holies, and only on one day a year, the Day of Atonement. Before entering, the high priest passed through a beautifully embroidered veil woven from purple, red, blue, and white threads. The colors were the same as used in the ephod and breastplate of the clothing of the high priest, minus the gold thread. Embroidered on the veil were cherubim, who symbolically guarded the dwelling place of God. As the high priest passed through the veil, he had to pass these angels, who, like in the Garden of Eden, guarded the way back to the presence of Lord. Upon entering the Holy of Holies, you would find that the room is the shape of a perfect cube, being 20 cubits wide, long and tall. The walls were likewise overlaid with gold and decorated with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. 2 large cherubim flanked the Ark of the Covenant, which was in the center of the room, with their wings stretching from one side of the room to the other. This room is where the presence of the Lord would dwell and represented the final goal and destiny of all Israel. What happened to the temple? The temple declined in wealth and importance for 367 years. Prophet Jeremiah warned that Jerusalem would be destroyed, and the people would be taken into captivity. Accordingly, the Babylonians looted and destroyed the temple under King Nebuchadnezzar II in about 587 BC. A second temple was later erected on the same site as noted in the Book of Ezra. Then, during the 1st century AD, Herod, the appointed head of Judea, enlarged and expanded that second temple in surrounding areas. Herod's temple included a restored porch. The Romans under Emperor Vespasian destroyed Herod's temple during the siege of Jerusalem in AD 70. Only a tiny portion of the retaining wall remains. Traditional and observant Jews pray 3 times a day for the temple's restoration.